So just want to welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight and rushing home and getting your dinner before joining us. I hope you were able to get dinner. Um, my name is Lorraine Lynch. I'm the Chief Program Officer at KCSARC. And what I thought we could do is do a quick round of introductions. And I think what I'll do is maybe just call on people and people can share their name and where they're from. And if there's anything else you'd like to share, feel free. Dr. Harvey, I'm going to put you on the spot since we've already been chatting a little bit. So.
Sure. I'm Shannon Harvey. I'm the Deputy Superintendent for the Renton School District. So happy to join you tonight.
Thank you. It's nice to meet you. Is it Mylin? Would you like to go next?
Yes, hello, good evening. My name is Mylin Tai. I'm State Representative for the 41st Legislative District. Thank you for hosting this event.
Yeah, thank you for being with us. Dr. Avanti Berquist, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Avanti Berquist. I'm the current president of the Renton School Board.
Nice to have you. Nice to meet you. Carmen, would you like to go next?
Hi, my name is Carmen Rivera, and I'm elected city council person in the city of Renton.
Oh, great. Thanks for being with us. Jenny Chang, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, thank you. I'm Jenny Chain, she, her pronouns. I'm the Executive Legislative Assistant for Senator Bob Hasegawa of the 11th Legislative District. Nice being here.
Yeah, thanks for being with us. I see we have Leanne. Is it Leanne? I see Leanne's iPhone. Yeah.
Hello, unmute. Yes, I'm Leanne Moss, the Executive Director of the Renton Regional Community Foundation.
Great. Glad to have you here with us. Haley, would you like to just do a quick intro as well?
Higgins. I work for a nonprofit in Seattle called Chicken Soup Brigade. Happy to meet you all.
Thanks, Haley. Laurel, would you like to, I'm just going around my boxes here. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Laurel Redden. I'm the Director of Communications and Policy at KCSARC. Thank you.
Thanks. Karen.
Hi. Hello, everybody. Nice to see you. I'm Karen Sharp. I'm the Chief External Relations Officer here at KCSARC. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Karen. Cindy.
Hi, I'm Cindy. I'm the Development Coordinator at KCSARC, and it's really nice to meet you all.
Great. Mary Ellen, last but not least.
Hi, I'm Mary Ellen Stone, Executive Director, and so nice to see you. Thank you for coming in. Jenny, you and I have talked so much, and it's just really great to see you on the Zoom. So I'm really glad you could be here today.
Thank you all. Well, I wanted to just, I think a lot of you are familiar with KCSARC services, but I just wanted to share quickly, that we provide comprehensive services for survivors of sexual assault. We started with a 24-hour resource line and have grown over the years. We have client care specialists that take the call when survivors call. They will help triage and connect survivors with services, whether that's legal advocacy, family services, medical advocacy, therapy, case management. We provide wraparound supports for survivors. And of course, there's prevention, which is what we were going to talk about tonight. And, our prevention work is, we're going to learn a lot more about this evening, but it's multifaceted. It is, layered. It involves ongoing developmentally appropriate conversations with children, adolescents, and the adults in their lives, whether that's at the schools, in their homes, in their communities. We do believe, that we can have a world without sexual violence, and that these conversations are important in accomplishing that. And so we that is one of the reasons why we are focusing our prevention work in the Renton schools. So we can provide opportunities to have ongoing conversations with kids, with educators, so they can continue those conversations, and also so they can confidently respond to disclosures and help connect the children and students to the services and the supports that they need. We have Haley Higgins here this evening. Thank you, Haley, again for coming and also sharing with us about your tasty dinner. And Haley is going to share about some of the why this work is so important. So Haley, thank you again for being willing to share with us tonight.
Thank you for the introduction. Hello, everyone. Good evening. I really value your time and your attention here listening to my story and to KCSARC. Let me introduce myself a little bit with some background. I grew up in South King County, actually running around Maplewood Heights in Renton, where my grandma worked. I went on to graduate from the University of Washington, and I later served as a Peace Corps volunteer in Peru. I came back to South King County, teaching dual language kindergarten in the Renton School District. Now I work for a local nonprofit. I love going on long runs with my dog, and I'm getting my master's in public health from Berkeley right now. But ultimately, none of this would have been possible without people believing in me and getting me the support that I needed. When I was 4 and 5 years old, I was molested by my uncle. It was such a scary time in my life. Excuse me. I would go to school, play with my friends, and try to pretend that it didn't happen. I held my secrets inside for 5 long years. Those 5 years I lived in confusion and a lot of miserable nights. I felt like I went numb inside and buried my secrets deep. I was scared I would get in trouble or adults would be mad at me for getting him in trouble. But it wasn't until I received the encouragement from a classmate to tell an adult. And then at 10 years old, I finally built up enough courage to tell my parents. It was the most terrifying thing I've ever done, even scarier than right now, letting those secrets out of me. But I'm so proud of my 5th grade self. She was so brave. Immediately, my parents believed me. My mom is an elementary school counselor and thankfully knew to call KCSARC. We called the KCSARC 24/7 support line, and I got connected with trauma-informed therapy, family therapy services, and a legal advocate to help us walk through the prosecution. I think my mom was on the phone with KCSARC that entire night, probably. I had a support system rally around me, supporting me every single day, from my teachers to my family, to coaches, to my therapists. I was supported and believed every single day, which is something I'm really grateful for that not everyone gets. I vividly remember our sex education in 5th grade. The discomfort was palpable in the air. The teachers skirted around answers and made us to feel embarrassed about our own bodies. This discouraged me even further from telling my truth. And I fear that if I had access to comprehensive, age-appropriate health education, I wouldn't have suffered in silence for so long. I can only imagine that I would have told adults sooner. My perpetrator walked free those 5 years, posing a risk to more innocent children. If only I had known about consent, my boundaries of my body, if only I had known that no one is allowed to touch my body without permission. If only more trusted adults told me I could talk to them about anything, perhaps we could have prevented a lot of pain. The thing is, we're here tonight because we have the science and the data to back us up that comprehensive, age-appropriate sex education works. It works to prevent sexual assault. It works to help children speak up sooner. It teaches our youth boundaries and safe touch. I really believe it works. We should be thrilled. I'm thrilled that we have this opportunity to intervene and to potentially save little children from misery. being a child is hard enough and confusing enough. No child should have to go through life worrying about abuse. So as a survivor of sexual assault and a previous kindergarten teacher, I know that we can do better, and it's our responsibility. Thank you for listening to my story. I'm really grateful for this opportunity.
Thank you, Haley. Thanks for sharing your story and just your willingness to come to the group tonight and just share your wisdom. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah. And Chris Johnson, I see a lot of hearts. I see a lot of hearts on the screen. I think a lot of people feel that for you. Chris Johnson is our Director of Prevention here at KCSARC. He has a long history with KCSARC. He started with prevention work. He went back to graduate school. He came back to KCSARC and has been a trauma therapist with our clinical team for the past 5 years. And recently decided, you know, I want to go back and do some prevention work. And we're really fortunate to have him and that expertise that he brings. So Chris, I pass it to you.
Thank you, Lorraine. Thank you, everybody, for coming here tonight. I really thank you, Haley. Your story is, as I've told you before, is sort of at the bedrock of why we do this work in prevention. I'm here to talk a little bit about the prevention work that we have been engaged with, that we are currently engaged with, and where we're going in the Renton School District. It's really exciting. Cindy, I don't know if you have, there's a PowerPoint that I have that we'll use a little bit of it. I'll try to get through that pretty quickly. But if you can go ahead and pull that up, just to sort of serve as a guide about what we're going to be talking about. So just so folks know, this is a project that started last year in the spring. And what this is, Making Prevention Possible, is this a project where we are able to bring a bunch of education and prevention information into the schools of the Renton School District. Go ahead and go on to the next slide, Cindy. So Making Prevention Possible is a multi-year, multi-strategy session approach to sexual violence prevention. Now, we say that we are in 4 schools this school year, and I'm actually thinking that we are actually probably going to be able to stretch that to a 5th school this school year as well. But we're looking primarily, we're holding all of this in the Renton School District. Go on to the next slide, Cindy. So just to give you a really brief background about sort of all of the work that we do in prevention at KCSARC. It is all guided by what we call the 9 principles of prevention. This is something that Washington State's Coalition of Sexual Assault Programs pulled together and has said this is really sort of a really good guide in all prevention work throughout the state. And if you are thinking about doing a prevention project, keep in mind these 9 principles. These 9 principles have been researched and have been shown to be sort of the effective methods of other primary prevention projects. Go on to the next slide, Cindy. So how did we start with this project? Well, this started out of the Senate Bill 5395, requiring all the new comprehensive sexual health education to K through 12 students in Washington State. And specifically, these new requirements is really what KCSARC is starting to build this project on. These new requirements around comprehensive sexual health education, specifically around affirmative consent, boundaries, healthy relationships, bystander intervention, and how those things play out in both the real world and in online spaces. So those topics, affirmative consent, boundaries, healthy relationships, bystander intervention, these were already things that KCSARC has historically been teaching youth about. So when these requirements came out, we really thought, you know, this is a place where we're really going to be able to sink our prevention teeth into the community and see what kind of difference we can make. Cindy, go on to the next slide. So this is just looking at estimations. So when we look at estimated rates of victimization of the roughly 15,500 students enrolled in Renton, We estimate that about 3,000 of those students will be victims of sexual assault before their 18th birthday. And I want to go on to the next slide, which we go from sort of this estimation into sort of real world numbers. I just want to point this slide out to folks too. So this is our own data from our agency. And this encompasses only last school year and only the middle school and high school students. And you can see through that school year of last year, we had 126 cases. You know, I know that a lot of people know that those numbers represent kids. I mean, I know those kids, I was their therapist. I know that people on this call are their teachers and their doctors and psychiatrists and their neighbors. So this 126 number is something that I am going to be keeping an eye on as we do this work in the schools. Go on to the next slide, Cindy. So I want to start breaking down a little bit about what this project actually looks like and what we are actually able to accomplish. So this year, we have the capacity to deliver 2 one-hour sessions to four schools in Renton, possibly a 5th school if we have that capacity. But these 2 one-hour lessons are going to be geared towards all of the students at these schools. So for last year, we were only able to get into Risdon Middle School, but we were able to give these 2 hours of prevention education to every one of their 6th graders, 7th graders, 8th graders over about 72 hours of education. So we're hoping to take that same model that we used at Risdon Middle and roll that out at Renton High School, at Dimmitt Middle School, and at Hazen High School as well, giving 2 hours of this prevention education to all of the student body. We also have the capacity to be offering student groups to these schools. So for students who are really interested in sort of doing these deep dives into sexual violence, really sort of wanting to understand what their role could be in preventing sexual violence, we have to, in working with these schools, we've got one at Risdon, developing these schools with students and faculty, so that students can figure out what they want to be able to, what they can do, and sort of where their passion is around preventing sexual violence. So these student groups can look like a variety of different things depending on what excites the students. So these might be awareness campaigns that the students are raising in the school. Other student groups decide that they want to take on education themselves. So they learn how to facilitate sexual violence lessons. They get trained up in peer-to-peer education. And then that is something that they take on. But we're really sort of following students' interest in these groups. Cindy, go on to the next slide. So these are the topics that we are covering with these schools. So all of these topics are, these are consistently taught through 6th through 12th grade. They just change a little bit depending on the age of the student. So we're always talking about boundaries, consent, coercion, healthy relationships, bullying and harassment, and of course, this bystander intervention. Go on to the next slide, Cindy. So while we are working with the students, we are also offering education to the staff of these schools, the educators and counselors. We also want them to be able to have knowledge and comfort in handling disclosures when kids come to them with problems. So we're creating, we're offering trainings for 2 trainings a year for the teachers at all 4 of these schools on handling disclosures and creating trauma-informed classrooms. And you know, if staff have other areas of interest that they would like to see their staff get trained on, we're also open to other training topics as well. But this piece of the educators and counselor piece, I'm going to get to about why it's important that we're reaching the adults, but I'm going to go on to the next slide also. So the parents and guardians. So one of the things that we know that is key to prevention is we have to have parents and guardians also informed on these prevention topics. So one of these things that I know has been sort of an area of concern for a lot of parents is comprehensive sexual health education in the classrooms. And my belief is that I want parents to actually know what is being taught in those classrooms on these topics, how these topics are being taught, so that they can continue to have these conversations with their kids after we leave. I can almost guarantee that the parents, if they were taught consent in school, looks very different than the way their kids are being taught consent now. So how are we going to reach parents? Well, we are reaching parents through multiple online Zoom trainings that are already sort of offered at various schools. But because we also know that parents are really busy, it's really hard to come to a Zoom training in the evening. We've also created this a prevention podcast that is geared towards parents, where we are sharing the information that we are teaching students in the classrooms, and where we're also answering frequently asked questions that students ask of us around relationships, sexual violence, so that parents can have an understanding of what their own kids are sort of questioning, their own sort of thoughts they have on this topic, and how we're sort of answering them. So we're really hoping that these podcasts are going to be something that's really important. We know that the parents and guardians are incredibly important for this work, as are the teachers. These are the trusted adults that we are sending our kids to when they have problems. So we want these parents and guardians, educators, to have good, solid information about how to handle disclosures when kids do come to them as the trusted adult. Go on to the next slide, Cindy. So the outcomes, why are we studying this? Basically, we want to make sure that our program works, that we want to understand that the outcomes that we are trying to achieve around consent education we are actually achieving them. And we want to contribute to the body of research that will continue to guide sexual violence programs. If our program is working, that's awesome. Can we make it work better? So let's go on to the next slide. So basically what we're thinking is, based on the literature, we believe that building skills and knowledge in individuals, they will be less likely to engage in abusive, unhealthy, or illegal behavior, and more likely to engage in healthy, mutually respectful relationships. And as we examine all of these outcomes year after year, we know that these results are going to continue to guide our curriculum and our prevention efforts. Next slide. So what are we starting to measure? So I want to start talking a little bit about the data that we're looking at and why we're looking at this data in particular. So of course, our pre-post measures that we are administering to students before they get our education and then after, we're looking at individuals' knowledge of all the various multiple aspects of consent. Do they understand affirmative consent in those aspects? We're also looking at an individual's willingness to break boundaries and their tendency to engage in bully behavior. And finally, the other thing that we're really starting to pay attention to is a person's tendency to practice empathetic and pro-social behaviors and attitudes. So this is the pre-post survey that we are looking at. These are sort of some of the measures. And of course, students can opt out of the survey if they choose to. As all of the education that we provide parents can, of course, opt their child out of any of this. Go on to the next slide, Cindy. Okay, so why are we focusing on consent and empathy and bullying? The reason we're focusing on these areas is because the literature has shown that these can either be predictors or mitigators of sexual violence. So all three of these areas, we are going to try to build some skill and capacity in. Go on to the next slide, Cindy. So we're hoping that we are going to see these attitudes and feelings will reflect an increased understanding of affirmative consent. We're hoping that our outcomes are going to show that bullying behavior will be decreasing. And we are also hoping that our outcomes are going to reflect an increase in empathetic and pro-social behaviors and attitudes. All right, next slide. So this is the data I want to talk about. This is the stuff that's already starting to be exciting for me. This is the stuff that we got from last year. So last year, this is the information that we were able to get from the surveys from the students at RISD. And actually today is our very first day back in RISD. We are having we had 5 hours of education at RISD today for the 6th grade. And there's our first day back. This is the results from last year. So we were able to survey 523 students ranging in age 11 to 14. 255 identified as male, 233 identified as female, 34 identified as other, and 1 did not provide a response. Students who did not consent to participate in the survey were not shown any of the items, and the survey was automatically closed. Next slide. So this is what we started looking at. So when we look at this data, we can already see what the sort of the baseline for our kiddos. This scale here is one of the ones for empathy. And over there on that y-axis, we can see the scale and then the age on the bottom. And we can see by looking at this graph that at age 11, empathy between males and females is really similar. And they sort of appear across the next 3 years to be sort of this consistent difference. Now, one of the things that we're going to be looking at in this data are these things, these lines that extend from the bottoms of these boxes. We're calling these whiskers. Now, every one of those dots on these graphs represents a student. And our goal, when we look at this data year after year, each time we survey, we would like to see these whiskers on the bottom get shortened and these fewer dots that are sort of just scattered randomly on the bottoms of these pages. Those are considered outliers. So we would like to see these numbers increase. So the higher the number, the more likely these students are to engage in empathetic behavior. You can see that the vast majority of students are already sort of around that 70%. So we would really like to see these outcomes sort of improve. So these bottom numbers get a little shorter. Sending on to the next slide. This is what our baseline of consent looked like. So overall, really good news. Most students already believe that the various aspects of consent are really important. And you can see that based on all the top dots at the very top of the scale. But you can also see that there's a lot of folks who do not believe that those elements of consent are important. So again, those whiskers on the bottoms of those boxes, we're going to hope to see get shorter. And we're going to have less outliers as we continue to survey and do this work through the schools. Let's show the next slide. This is just the one on pro-social behavior. Pro-social behavior is similar for males and females. And you can sort of see as the pro-social behavior sort of changes with age. Again, we're looking at those same decreases in whisker size. And finally, the last one, Cindy, is sort of the bullying. Now, on the top of this scale is a person's likeliness to not engage in bullying. So again, we're trying to see these numbers go up and the whiskers on the bottoms of these boxes come down. Anyway, that is sort of the data that we were able to collect from last year. That is the stuff that we are going to be looking at over this next year and subsequent years in this data to see, is this working? Is this working as good as it can be? Can we make this work better? And if this is working, and we can see that by teaching consent, that empathy increases, that by showing that by teaching empathy, bullying decreases. If we can show those things, then we would like to roll these things out to other communities. So that is kind of the that's sort of our work this year in a nutshell. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. Yes. Dr. Shannon Harvey.
Thanks, Chris. I was wondering if you could give us some examples of the types of questions that might be asked in different categories that aim to measure some of those different areas.
Sure. So like, for instance, let's say for the pro-social behavior. So one of the questions would be like, it is important for me to understand somebody else's feelings. That would be a question. Another question around empathy would be, I can appreciate someone else's success. And then students are able to sort of judge for themselves where they sort of fit on this scale, and able to sort of, identify those behaviors for themselves. And we also do that with the bullying behavior. So I will take someone's things without asking. I hit people when I'm angry. Fighting is sometimes the only way to solve problems. Those are other questions that are being asked on the surveys. And then, of course, we're actually also looking at those very specific elements of consent. age appropriateness, power, appropriate power, specificity of consent, able to make consent reversible. So those other elements we're also trying to see, do students see those as important in navigating boundaries?
Thank you. That's really helpful.
Let me just check. Are there other questions people might have?
Can I just say one more thing? I want to add one more anecdote in here with my 1 minute I've got left. So true story. I was in the hallway the other day. One of our other therapists came by and grabbed me and said, "Hey, Chris, I want to tell you something really quick." She said, "I have a new client. She is a 15-year-old and she was sexually assaulted. And she didn't tell anybody about it for about 3 months. The very first person she told was her best friend. And the statement that her best friend made to her was, 'We just learned about consent at school and that wasn't consensual.' And they discussed it. They decided they should tell her mother. They wound up telling the mother. The mother called KCSARC. And we were able to get the child into services. And that is just like a secondary outcome of this work of just having students being able to have the resources and knowledge to be able to help their fellow students, because we know students are often serving as the first responders to their peers. As much as we want them to go to a trusted adult, it's often that their peer, their best friend, who is going to be the first person who's going to receive that information, that initial disclosure. Anyway, I liked that story.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Haley, I see you nodding because I know that was your experience too, right?
Milan, I see your hand up.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. One technical question is, how long is this particular program going to be at Prison Middle School? Right, I mean, is this going to be a longitudinal study? Is this going to be a short-term study? Number one. Number two, how do you get students to open up and answer these questions? Just because of a few examples that you've shared, yes. So I'm curious, how do you engage with students, and then like the number at the very beginning, 126.
Yes.
126 of students who currently being supported by KCSARC, or 126 students engaged in answering questions, answering the survey, and participating in this particular project?
Great questions. So I'm going to kind of start backwards from that. So that 126 number is actually the number of cases. So those were child victims of sexual assault who we served at KCSARC. We had 523 survey participants in this survey. How do we get kids to open up? You know, part of that is asking questions. I was blown away last year by how eager kids are to talk about this subject. So, you know, of course, we don't go in, you know, discussing sexual violence. That's not certain when we're going into the 6th graders. We're talking about boundaries. We're talking about respecting boundaries, and we draw examples from the students' own lives. So, you know, we talk about what kind of boundary violations do you experience? We don't use that kind of language, but essentially the stuff we wind up engaging students on are things like, I really hate it when my sibling comes into my room without asking. I really hate it when my sibling eats my food without asking. I really hate when my sibling takes my clothes and wears them when I haven't even had a chance to wear them yet. So we can actually start talking about boundaries and consent with their own examples. So rather than us coming in with examples, we ask them to sort of draw from their own experiences so that we can start laying this foundation for consent when we talk about boundaries. Oh, and the last question I think that you had was, how long are we going to be in the schools? As long as we can be, as long as our funding holds out. The goal is to be longitudinal. So that because we want to be able to track these same students year over year. We know that prevention is not a one-time thing. We know that it has to be repeated conversations, multiple touch points throughout a child's life. So we want to sort of examine this cumulative effect on this also. So we want to be there as long as we can be.
May I have a follow-up?
Sure.
You may have as many follow-up as you like.
I'm behaving like if I'm in my own, my apology. Being trained very well. So do you engage with students for the example that you have shared? Is it in a homeroom specific? Is it post a oh goodness, I forgot the terminology, like a rally or a gathering of students? Like, in which environment do you have these conversations?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because we know that these conversations are difficult. And for kids to open up, we also know that they have to be in a smaller environment than sort of like a big assembly. So we will never do this work in an assembly level. This is always done in an individual classroom. So with a maximum of about 20 students, at most 25, I think was the most we had, was the biggest classroom we had. But it's only one classroom. And that way we really feel like we can really dig in with these kids, answer their questions, and that there's less pressure for them to feel like they have to sort of perform for their classmates if there's fewer of them. So yeah, so it's in the classrooms, and basically it's whatever classrooms schools can carve out for us. So last year at RISDM, we were in their science and their social studies classrooms. I think Hazen's going to try to get us into their health classrooms. It really just depends on sort of, what the school's capacity is too.
Yeah, I was about asking whether it was mostly conducted in health classroom, because with the requirement that we have one health class in middle school and I think 1.5 credit of health and PE in high school. So I was curious if it was in health class specifically. Thank you.
Chris glossed over the funding piece. I do want to say Senator Hasegawa, Representative Bergquist, and Representative Hackney were the drivers to get the funding for this 3-year effort. And so particularly appreciate that. But, we need to look at this as being a sustainable piece as well. So that's where the data and the research is going to be helpful for us to be able to say this is working or not. Chris, I'm going to take the prerogative as the person handling questions to ask you a question, which is one of the things I've heard you say is you and Hannah and Jessica, the other staff on this project, are going to be getting questions from middle school students. And then you're going to be putting those up on the podcast or in other places so that parents hear, these are the questions that my 7th grader is asking, or my 5th graders. I'm wondering if you could share some of those questions. If you've got some. Now, I may be jumping this, but
you wouldn't believe me if I asked you some of these questions. I mean,
they'll tell us.
Well, yeah, sure. So like,
they're professionals here. They know this. I don't, but they would know these things.
Well, let me look at my list here. So questions such as, how do I help somebody who has been sexually assaulted?
Yeah.
How do I know if I was raped? What resources are available in schools to help students? I mean, these are just questions that these are frequently asked questions. So these aren't even questions, these aren't even one-off questions. We're trying to compile lists of these questions that we get all the time. The ones that we also have a lot of here on these that we get is about teacher on student contact. How do you report a teacher who's doing something that makes you feel creepy? How many times are you supposed to report a teacher till they stop doing what they're doing? These are questions that students are also asking of us.
Okay.
And who do you report these
to? Yeah, Dr. Harvey, you want to jump in?
Yeah, Chris, when you are in a school and you get a question like that, are you alerting administration, or like how can we ensure that we highlight that for somebody who may need that information?
Yeah, well, we talk a lot about mandatory reporting in the classrooms. While in our sessions, we talk about mandatory reporting. And so these questions that we get are often in frequent, sort of the anonymous questions box that we use. So these aren't generally asked in class. These are questions that we get either after class, but the questions about the teachers arrive in sort of note form. But when our questions are asked in the classroom, there are teachers always present in that classroom. So sometimes it depends on the teacher in that classroom, how they respond. They may ask more questions, they usually don't. But we will invite that student, check in with that student afterwards. Do they want to talk more about this? If they want to make a report, we would help them do that. Like I said, I'm a therapist. Hannah, one of our other prevention specialists, is also a therapist, and we have a legal advocate who's our third prevention specialist. If she wants to talk about reporting options, she wants to talk about support, figuring out what to do, we would be the ones to help her do that. And then of course, we work with the school. But again, if we don't have specific allegations towards a specific teacher, or even made by a specific student, there's not a lot we can do to follow up on that, except answer the question.
Thank you. Of course, you got my nervous attention on that as we, if there's something that we need to be doing a little more digging into, whether it be specifically if it is a staff member, where especially when you say like how many times would I have to have reported it?
Yeah.
Obviously, wanting to make sure that I know you guys are mandatory reporters, but also how do we help administration have that kind of heads up that type of a question is being asked?
Yeah, I think it's important. We did a teacher training for the RISD teachers just a few weeks ago, and just had them answer their questions about this and talked about sort of what the students are interested in, but really wanting to make sure that people there also knew how to report, what to report, because that bystander intervention is not just for kids, that's also for teachers and staff, knowing what to look for and what kind of behaviors put kids at risk.
Yeah, I think good questions, and I think my antenna also went up. I knew that those are some of the questions that are coming. It speaks to the importance of the partnership that we have with the school district and the school administration. And I think that's where I so appreciate the support from you, Dr. Harvey, the school board members, Dr. Bergquist and board member Chauvel, of just saying thank you, because this has got to be a whole group effort here. We can't be going in, and what we're doing is trying to reinforce all of these messages also to the parents in the community. And that's our vision, is Renton, our home, really becoming a community free of sexual assault. And how can we do that? I want to just check for other questions. I want to be careful about people's time. You've been generous with being here. Representative Tai, I think I may have cut you off at one point. Did you have any other questions?
No, you didn't. I was just
I didn't.
in the background. I forgot to mute myself. My apologies.
Okay, no problem. No problem. Let me just check. Dr. Bergquist, anything? City council members, thank you for being here. Council or Senate staff, Jenny, anything you want to take back to your senator? You're good? Are we all good? Oh, yes.
Oh, I guess I physically raised my hand. I didn't actually raise my hand. My apologies. And
I saw that. I usually don't see the little icon, so I'm glad you did that.
How can the city of Renton be the best partnership in this program, or be the best partner in this program?
Okay, so let me take a go at that, and then I'm going to pass that to Lorraine and Chris. We want to make sure the council knows what we're doing, and we're happy to do a whole presentation to the council. We also want the council to be able to really encourage the community that this is an important thing. You've got a bully pulpit that most people don't have. And so for the council members to use the vehicles you've got to really reinforce some of these things, like parents need to be involved. And we want to help parents be involved. And we want to help community leaders do this. It's not just the students and the teachers. And so I think using some of those vehicles that you've got really can make a big difference, because you're normalizing something and saying, yeah, we all have to do this. So that would be a really big help. And actually, and let me just, yes, and Rep. Ty, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking
Yes.
that about funding.
I'm always thinking about funding, so this is music to my ears.
So I wonder if I can bend Councilmember Rivera a little bit about funding and that partnership between city and school district. Right? I mean, your work, especially around shifting the funding so that you can support students and family. And can you imagine being able to shift some of the funding that might be harmful to student and family to something like this, for more therapists available at school, for more training, professional development for educators at school? So I took the opportunity to really kind of squeeze that in, so council member would consider when you consider your city budget.
Yes.
If I can actually, can I follow up on that? And this is where maybe Dr. Berquist can jump in. From my understanding, and maybe this is ignorant because we just got our budgets for the next 2 years, the school district budget is separate from the city budget. So the city has its own budget, and then the school has its own budget based off the property taxes of that area, right? Okay, all right, just making sure.
Right, but can I elaborate a little bit? Come on, school district. So I can speak to Bellevue School District. So Bellevue School District would ask the city to support like wraparound services, and city would fund staff for wraparound services, providing simply because the city, school district in Bellevue have high need schools, have not met Title I in terms of but high need. And so that was one arrangement. The other arrangement that we are asking the city of Bellevue considering is, instead of fully funding what we asked for the school resource officer from the city, we ask if the funding that the city would be willing to give for school resource officers instead take some of that and fund for mental and behavioral therapists at school. So my apology for not clearly articulating your power, council member, when it's come to budget allocation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Representative Ty. I really appreciate your advocacy on behalf of the school district. We really appreciate it. And I think you make a good point, and just in terms of how do we better partner. We appreciate the work that KCSARC has done in working in our schools, starting at Risden and working with our health classes, and then really building out how we can support our staff to have the conversations, build their capacity to lead these conversations themselves.
Right.
As for, I think Haley said it really well, oftentimes our teachers are not really trained to have these really challenging conversations with our students. So I think the more that we can continue to work together and to partner on this is really important. So thank you.
Well, and I just want to say we could not have a better set of partners than the people and the organizations represented on the screen. And I think where we can also continue to say to parents, we're in this with you. You know, that we really want to support you, because parents are the most critical piece. And how can we all work together on this? And I think I'm really excited about the conversations and the great questions that are coming up today. We're really happy to keep talking and helping with messaging too, to get that out there. I want to just do a check, because you have been generous, and it's 10 to 8, and it's been a long day for everybody. I'm going to say thank you so much for being here. Haley, thank you for speaking out and being loud. And thank you, Chris, to your great work. And thank you to all of our partners. Renton's always been our home. And this is another reason why we're just so happy to be in Renton. We're just in the new Triton Tower building. We never got the open house because of the pandemic, but we're there and we love Renton.